Hi scholars, I'm so excited to continue reading Civil War on Sunday with you guys. When we left off yesterday, you guys had the special task of summarizing Chapter 4, Freedom Fighters. I heard you guys saying that Jack and Annie spent time in the hospital tents in the field. They were cheerfully helping even though Annie was super confident and Jack was very nervous. And Jack met a black soldier who was fighting against slavery, and Jack and Annie heard that Clara Barton was back. So with that summary, now we know where we left off and we can get started with Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Angel of the Battlefield. Now, in our text preview, we heard that Clara Barton was sometimes called Angel of the Battlefield, and we just read yesterday at the end of Chapter 4, Clara Barton was on her way back. So I'm thinking Chapter 5 might be about Clara Barton. Jack still didn't remember who Clara Barton was, so he pulled out the Civil War book and read. Clara Barton was a famous Civil War nurse. When she began nursing, she used her own money for her supplies. She drove a horse-drawn ambulance right onto the battlefield to help save wounded soldiers. For this reason, she became known as the Angel of the Battlefield. Jack put the book away, and then he hurried to Annie. He looked at the woman sitting in the driver's seat of the wagon. She doesn't look like an angel, Jack thought. The woman was very small. She had a plain, serious face and dark hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a long black skirt and a black jacket. In the back of her wagon were more wounded soldiers in torn and bloody uniforms. They moaned and cried out. Nurses, both men and women, were putting the wounded men on stretchers. Clara Barton wiped her forehead. She looked hot and tired. "Can we help you, Miss Barton?" Annie asked. "Who are you?" said Clara Barton. "Jack and Annie," said Annie. "We're volunteer nurses. What can we do, Miss Barton?" Clara Barton smiled. "First, you can call me Clara," she said. "Second, would you ride with me back toward the battlefield? There are more wounded waiting to be picked up." "Sure," said Annie. Wait a second. We just read that Clara Barton was wiping her head and acting very tired and hot and tired, but now Clara Barton wants to go back into the field? Why is Clara Barton going back even though it's dangerous on the battlefield and she's so tired? What do you guys think? What text evidence do we have to explain Clara Barton's motivation? I know. In the text it says, there are more wounded waiting to be picked up. And we know that Clara Barton is a nurse, so Clara wants to help the wounded soldiers get better. She knows to do that, she's going to have to go out into the field. So that's why she, even though she's tired, she decides to go back out into the battlefield. So Annie said sure, very excitedly, and Jack didn't answer. After seeing all the suffering men in the wagon, he was afraid of getting closer to the battlefield. "And you?" Clara asked Jack. Her dark, serious eyes looked right into his. Jack didn't want to admit he was afraid. "Sure, no problem," he said. Jack and Annie are so different. Annie was eager to get going and excitedly said sure, but Jack took some convincing. "Very good," said Clara Barton. "Let's go." Jack and Annie climbed up into the driver's seat next to her. By now, all the soldiers had been taken out of the wagon. "Take care of my new family members," Clara called to the nurses. She snapped the reins. The horse-drawn ambulance rolled off, sending up clouds of dust. And that's the end of Chapter 5 already. That one was quick. But I still want us to stop and summarize Chapter 5, Angel of the Battlefield. Take a second to think about what you would summarize as the most important main ideas or events of this chapter, Angel of the Battlefield. I'm going to refresh your memory with the picture. I know I would say in Chapter 5, Angel of the Battlefield, Jack and Annie met Clara Barton. Jack didn't think Clara looked like an angel, but she was kind and friendly. She said she needed help with the soldiers who were still wounded and asked Jack and Annie. Annie was eager to help, and Jack finally agreed. So that was my quick summary of chapter 5. Remember, I just used 3 to 4 sentences and explained the most important parts or the main idea using those character names. Now we're going to read chapter 6. It's going to be your turn to summarize this chapter. It's a short one too, so I know you can do it. Chapter 6, Keep Low. The wagon jerked and swayed as it bumped over the dry ground. Jack felt as though he were frying in the hot sunlight. Dust from the road filled his throat and eyes. The boom of cannons grew louder and louder. Jack heard popping sounds too, like the noise of firecrackers. "What's that popping noise?" he shouted, blinded by the dust and sunlight. "Musket fire," said Clara. Jack remembered that muskets were long, old-fashioned guns. "What are those flashes?" asked Annie. Jack tried to open his eyes and see what she was talking about. He saw bright flashes of light in the distance and puffs of smoke in the sky. "Cannon shells exploding," said Clara Barton. "Shells are like small bombs. They have ruined a lot of farmland." Jack squinted at the passing countryside. The ground was filled with ugly holes. Long ditches were also cut through the fields. "Did the shells make those ditches too?" he asked. "No, those are trenches the soldiers dug for a battle," Clara said. "Each side digs their own. Day after day, they sit in their trenches, firing their muskets at one another." Jack tried to imagine how terrible it would be to sit in a trench all day, waiting to be shot or waiting to shoot someone else. "We have to get some water," said Clara. She drove the wagon to a narrow creek. A stream of water flowed downhill, running over the rocks. Wow, we are always wanting to understand our characters, and part of that is identifying how our characters are feeling. How do you think Jack is feeling right now? I agree. Jack is feeling very afraid because in the text, he asked what that noise was, and Clara said musket fire. And Jack remembered that muskets were long, old-fashioned guns. And now he's hearing cannons, different cannons and shells. So Jack is so frightened by the dangers of battle and the sounds that he's hearing. The wagon came to a halt. Jack heard a whistling sound and then another. "Keep low," cried Clara. "What was that?" Jack asked. "Cannon fire," she said. Jack and Annie crouched down in the driver's seat. Jack felt a rush of panic. He pulled out their list. His hands were shaking as he read. "Be brave." "Oh, great," he thought. Another cannon shell whizzed overhead, and then another. The ground exploded over and over in flashes of light. Dirt flew everywhere. Clouds of smoke and more dust filled the air. The horses neighed and whined. "Be brave," Jack thought. "Be brave." That's already the end of chapter 6. It was pretty quick, but I know you guys are still going to be able to summarize this chapter. Chapter 6, Keep Low. What are the important details or main idea that we should know from this chapter? You're going to summarize this chapter in 3 to 4 sentences on a note, in Seesaw, or on a piece of paper. I'm looking to make sure you still use your characters' names. I know that you guys can do it.